Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This session is going to be conducted in English, and this session will last about 90 minutes. We have three great speakers today. We have Professor Ronald Austin, Professor Jorge Maldonado, and Professor Rene Kitzeltek. Three of them come from the Americas, and every presenter we have a 30-minute slot, so we will have about 25 minutes for the presentations plus 5 minutes for the questions and answers. So let's start with the first speaker. Let me introduce, I have the real pleasure to introduce you Professor Ron Austin, who is a university professor emeritus, former dean of education and founding director of the Institute for Research in Learning Technologies at York University in Canada. Professor Austin has spoken at numerous national and international conferences about blended and online learning, also authored or co-authored some 50 commissioned studies and published over 60 articles in top-tier journals. Currently, Dr. Austin ranks among the most cited blended learning researchers according to Google Scholar. And he's also actively engaged right now in research consulting and public speaking, leading a successful series of webinars for Contact North on the use of Zoom for teaching, which over 10,000 educators around the world who have registered for or downloaded. Professor Austin is going to have this presentation with the title, The New Blended Normal, 7 Models for the Return to the Post-Pandemic Campus. So the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm assuming everything is okay and you hear me well. So delighted to be here today to join everyone and to share my thoughts about blended learning. And in particular, the return to the post-pandemic campus. Most of us now have been teaching remotely, perhaps via Zoom or other video conferencing system. And now institutions are making plans to return to the campus. Some classes will be face-to-face, very few perhaps, but many will be hybrid models, blended models. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. One thing we can say for certain, no matter what we'll be doing exactly when classes resume in September, is it's quite certain we're not going to be seeing too many classes like this. This is one at York University, about 600 students, one professor at the front. Notice the lack of social distancing, of course, no masks. Was something we won't see for quite a long time, I suspect, but we'll see more like this, smaller classes perhaps. Notice the social distancing here, and students perhaps being given designated seats. But perhaps even more normal is going to be blended classes like this. If you notice the class, very few students face-to-face, but if you look at the screen right here, move over to the side, you'll see that many students are coming in remotely to this class. And I think we'll see a lot more of that. Also, again, notice the instructor and the participants wearing face masks. And that's going to make communication kind of difficult. But one thing I don't recommend is standing on the desk to project your voice better. Try to get a microphone. So anyway, here's what we're going to see, a lot of more blended learning, and that's going to be quite clear. Video conferencing, perhaps video conference sessions are going to dominate, but I think we're going to see a bit more of combinations of video conferencing and face-to-face. Here are the 7 models that I want to talk about in this brief session. We're going to talk about first, there will certainly be fully synchronous video conference sessions occurring. I think we're going to start seeing now a blend of synchronous and asynchronous, more of that occurring. We're going to see the high flex model. I'll talk about that some more. This is where students are given the option of attending either face-to-face or remotely. And we're going to see the blend flex model as well. This is a model where students have an allotted time to attend on campus, but not everyone can attend at the same time. Students attend in cohorts. We're going to see a traditional blended learning where there's a thoughtful blend of online and face-to-face. We're going to see the flipped classroom. That's where the content is delivered online, but we'll see the small classes perhaps gathering on campus, tutorial classes, discussion groups, and so on. And of course, we are going to see fully face-to-face courses. And in place of normal breakout groups, say where students pull their chairs together for discussion, we're going to see perhaps those sessions occurring virtually outside of the normal physical class. So these are the 7 models I want to share with you today. I want to talk with you about some of the strengths, advantages of these models, and some of the limitations. One thing I want to begin with, though, is talk about some basic ideas for student engagement, particularly in blended learning. One thing we have to make sure to do is to create a welcoming environment. Students are feeling isolated. We want to make them feel welcome and part of our classes. And we do this often through breakout ice-breaking activities such as having students say 2 truths, 1 lie about themselves. They can be socially oriented, or they can be ice-breaking activities related to the course content. Second principle I want to emphasize is we want to break up our content presentations. We want to have presentations that last no more than about 10 or 15 minutes, and we can have multiple presentations, but mini lectures, but we all know that it's very difficult to keep your attention focused on a speaker when they speak for more than 10, 15, 20 minutes at the utmost. You'll notice, for instance, that TED Talks, very successful TED Talks, limit their sessions to no more than 20 minutes. Even Bill Gates, when he spoke, I think it was 18 minutes that he spoke because TED organizers have found, in fact, that you're able to retain content in that period of time, and you're able to present fairly complex ideas in a meaningful way. So we want to make sure that we chunk our presentations and not give long, extensive lectures. We also want to foster community building. Students are feeling isolated, as I mentioned. In some cases, they lack their peer interaction. And we want to do this in blended environments, particular online environments. And we do that often through breakout activities, the whole group discussions, and so on. And lastly, we want to make sure to promote active learning, get away from just the content presentation, allow students to get involved in working with the content that they're studying through problem solving, group discussions, case studies, and other means. And interestingly, some research has been done, quite a bit of research, in fact, on active learning. And researchers have found that by far, students learn better, more effectively when they are involved in active learning. There is an interesting study just recently conducted at Harvard University in some science courses that comparing active learning to traditional lectures. In fact, the researchers found that students did better in active learning. However, what I thought was quite interesting in this study was that, in fact, students felt they did not do very well. They felt they did not learn, even though, in fact, the results show that they did learn more in active learning. So students often will push back and say, it's up to you as the instructor to make me learn. But in fact, when students get engaged with the content, they do learn more effectively. So now let's take a look. So I think these principles are important to keep in mind in all of our, actually any kind of presentation, even if it's fully face-to-face. These are ideas I think we want to embed in all of what we do. So first of all, the first model is fully synchronous. And of course, I'm going to talk about, for all the models, sort of the main advantage really in terms of our current situation of COVID, or perhaps even as we move into post-COVID era. The main advantage, of course, and we've been experiencing this, of fully synchronous, that is like video conference, Zoom-based sessions, for instance, is the physical safety and the accessibility to everyone, instructors and students. One of the big challenges we face, though, as I just talked, is to avoid the talking head, to have long drawn-out lectures. There's a tendency of many faculty just to take their face-to-face class lecture and then just move that into a fully synchronous environment. But no, we want to avoid that as much as we possibly can and chunk the content presentation. So the strategy is to vary the pace of the classes, give mini lectures, pause, perhaps show videos, have whole group question and answer discussions, breakout room activities, and of course give opportunities for students to do presentations. I give a series of webinars for Contact North, and I'll give here's the address for those webinars, and they've all been recorded. And in my basic webinar, I talk about 4 models that we might want to consider in using when we're doing Zoom or fully synchronous presentations. There's what I call the student interactive model. There's the student-led seminar model, video interactive model, and what I call also the content-focused model. So these are 4 models that I've developed that will help us vary the pace and introduce more variety into our fully synchronous sessions. So with no doubt we'll be seeing a lot more of fully synchronous sessions, but these may be waning perhaps as we move to more face-to-face. We are going to see still asynchronous sessions. There's no doubt about that. Asynchronous is going to continue. But one point that I would like to make is that I never advocate for fully asynchronous sessions. I always like to bring in a synchronous component. The main advantage, though, when you bring in that component is to enhance a sense of community. So students get to see you as the instructor, and they get to see each other as well and realize that they are part of a community. The biggest challenge you face, though, is trying to select what you do in those synchronous sessions. So the asynchronous mode is best suited, of course, for content presentation, resources, reflective discussion, quizzes, and so on. In the synchronous sessions, the best suited for spontaneous discussions. It reinforces a sense of community, social cohesion, and instructor presence. When I teach asynchronous courses, I typically will bring in maybe 3 to 4 synchronous sessions. At the beginning of the course, I always have a synchronous session, and that allows everyone to introduce themselves, for me to introduce myself, give a tour of the course, what the expectations are, and so on, and of course answer any questions about the course. Then midway through the course, I'll have another session just to touch base to see where student progress is going, and also answer any questions, usually about major assignments that are coming due within a few weeks. And then I'll typically also have a session at the very end when students may present projects that they were working on, and we have a discussion, and it's a way of wrapping up the course quite nicely, I feel. So there we're going to see then, I think, not only just asynchronous, but we're going to see synchronous and asynchronous blended. Next, as we move to campus models, we're going to see the HyFlex model, I think, quite clearly. HyFlex model is when you try to create an environment of flexibility for students. Students will have the choice of attending in person or participating online, usually through synchronous sessions. However, asynchronous participation is also possible in the HyFlex model. So students might choose one day to come to campus, and the next class they may choose to come again, and then the third class they may choose to participate online. So typically those classes are set up with a video session, a live video conferencing session, a Zoom type session where students can then participate. The sessions, those classes are usually recorded, made available to students through the learning management system. Then the real challenge of this model is to assume that to ensure that there really is equivalent outcomes in both modes and equitable access. So in other words, students should be able to learn the same material and have the same outcomes, whether they're participating fully face-to-face or fully online. And that is the big challenge. Brian Beatty from San Francisco State University is the one of the leaders who developed this model, and he's written about it as well and given various webinars. So you may want to look for some of his sessions, Brian Beatty. And I highly recommend them if your campus is anticipating using more of this model. My own campus, York University, will be using this model. In fact, they've said that any student who would normally have a face-to-face class, the option of remaining home, let's say, or remotely, and participating in that class. And in fact, it works well for international students who may not be able to come to campus as well. So the strategies here is we have to make sure that all resources are online. We have to record classes. And one thing when we're teaching that way, when we're teaching in class, we don't want to ignore the Zoom students, the remote students. It's very easy to say, well, they're out there and we're here, and ignore them. But you need to look for techniques, for ways in which you can involve those students. Polling, using polls within Zoom or whatever tool you're using is a good way to engage the remote students, and making use of chat sessions. And typically you want to make sure that students in class can have access to those tools as well, to the chat tool and polling tools as well. So either through a laptop or maybe their smartphone. HyFaxLearning.org is the site that Brian Beatty has set up to describe and share resources about this model. Next, we're going to see what's called the BlendFlex model. This is a model that's been developed at University of Central Florida, and it's kind of interesting. The main advantage of this model is better space utilization. It's a version of the HyFlex. Typically, students are assigned to cohorts in this model because we have a given classroom, a given physical space, but we want to maintain social distancing. So let's say we have a class of 75, we'll divide it into three cohorts of 25, and they will be given a timetable of when they can attend campus. For instance, Monday, say it's a 3-day-a-week class. Cohort A, they'll attend on Monday, cohort B on Wednesday, and cohort C on Friday. And of course, the others would come in remotely. If it's once a week, then it's going to be every fourth week then that students would be coming back to campus. And so in other words, it would be the same thing, but just spread over the 3-week period. And students do not have the choice typically. If they miss, cohort A student misses Monday's session, they won't be able to return to class, physically to class, until the following Monday. So this makes good use of space utilization of existing classrooms. You can space students out and keep, say, 3 chairs between students and allow for that social distancing that will be necessary. So the big challenge is, how do you optimize the face-to-face time? You're having students come to campus, but you have to ask then, why are they coming to campus? What are they getting from that experience? Well, you want to make sure that it is a meaningful experience. It might be a course where there's a physical hands-on experience, a lab course. So those students would have the opportunity to come for those, or a studio course or something similar. Strategies we'll use, we want to make sure, of course, we record classes. Asynchronous discussions are good to have because students can continue the discussion outside of classes. And if you want to learn more about this model, you can look at digitallearning.ucf.edu. And many of the principles that apply to HyFlex would also apply to this model. Next, traditional blended learning. There's been extensive literature on blended learning. I've contributed to that myself a fair amount, studying various combinations of online and face-to-face and how you integrate them. Of course, the idea with traditional blended learning is taking advantage of the best of both worlds, best of the online world features and the best of the face-to-face features. And also this can lead to better space utilization as well. For instance, let's say the class meets for 3 hours a week. So normally, so the class would come, say, 1 hour a week, and the other equivalent amount of time would be spent online. And that would free up then, in theory, 2 hours additionally. So other courses could fit into that slot. So you can make better use of classroom space and allow more, again, social distancing, more spacing of students in classes. The challenge, of course, is, again, how to optimize that face-to-face time and how to integrate the online and face-to-face. They should not be considered two separate components, but an amalgam of the two components, and taking advantage of the two modes of teaching and having it flow from face-to-face into online and then online into face-to-face, making a smooth transition. So the strategy you want to use in this case is you need to analyze the course content and determine what is best taught online, face-to-face, making maximum use of that time, and what is best taught online. Flipped classroom, the R6 model here. This is the idea. It's been popularized where the instructor will present perhaps a lecture, record it, and that will be made available online to students. And there'll be other activities online posted in the learning management system. And the idea here is that when students come to class, they will have listened to the lectures, done the online activities, and then in class, they would have discussions, problem-solving activities, questions and answers, and so on. So one advantage of this model, perhaps, is better utilization, again, of space. You could have students coming in smaller groups, tutorial groups, where they will discuss and analyze the content. For instance, the model I studied at my own university, York University, was that there was a large class of 400 students. The lectures were all online, and students came to on-campus tutorial groups led by a teaching assistant, typically a doctoral student. And those classes would be 25 to 30 students, and they'd have multiple classes, multiple sections. And so students would have that opportunity of the close contact with a TA in this case, and also they could still interact with the instructor online. So the challenge is, how do you facilitate active learning in class and get students, though, to do the online work? That's the biggest problem with the weakness of this flip model. Those of you who may have taught will find that, in fact, students don't listen to the lectures and they'll come to class unprepared for the discussions and problem solving. So that's a dilemma. So you've got to focus on how you can improve that. So we want to create more engaging content. That's one strategy to overcome this. More engaging content, have online discussions, problem sets, and prepare students. Tell them what's expected when they come to class, and make sure they are ready. So this is one of the big challenges that we have to face, the flipped classroom model. But nevertheless, I think we're going to see more of this model because it allows the opportunity, again, of keeping smaller classes, still having the human contact of on campus, and the advantage of a campus experience. No doubt we're going to see classes where everyone is back in the classroom, perhaps with social distancing, using larger physical classrooms. Of course, the main advantage is going to be the social contact that we all feel is necessary in the campus experience. So of course, you have the challenge of engaging students in that lecture, as you always have. So that's what you'd expect. And then the strategy is going to be perhaps you want to have student discussions if you're promoting active learning in your classes. How do you have those student discussions? Well, it's probably not going to be acceptable to have students just turn in their chairs and talk to the person beside them or form small breakout groups. by pushing the chairs together into a little discussion group. That's probably not going to happen. It won't be acceptable. So then you can move those classes online and have Zoom discussion classes, sessions, which can be scheduled at the group's own convenience in between classes. So that's a model I think we're going to see a bit more of as well. In some ways, it's like the blended model, but the idea, though, of the online session would be merely for breakout room discussions with students. Instructors, of course, could join those sessions as well. So these, in a nutshell, I see our time is running by very quickly here. In a nutshell, 7 models I think that we can use as we move to the post-pandemic classroom. All models have got their advantages and, of course, their challenges and implementing them successfully. But there are strategies you can use to overcome them. So with that, I think I'm going to then pause and think we have time. I hope, Carlos, we've got time for 5 minutes or so for any questions.